This is the Own It Show, where we tell stories of how everyday people made ownership theirs to create extraordinary success.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Own It Show. I'm Justin.
And I'm Elise. Welcome to the show.
And so often we talk about living up to your potential and leaning into something that's different and being open to something that's different. And today we're bringing on a guest who has really leaned into that. He's owned who he is. He's owned his understanding of different and been open to opportunities presented his way. And I can't wait for you to listen to the stories that this guy's got going on, because he has been able to create for himself a life that a lot of people would dream of. And it's not something that happened overnight, but it's something that he earned. It's something that he earned into. It's something that he believed into. And by owning who he was, by going through these experiences, he was ultimately able to find this level of success. And so, without further ado, I can't wait to introduce you guys to Fit Body Bootcamp CEO, Bryce Henson.
Thank you for having me on the show. Super pumped to connect.
Bryce, I'm just so enthralled by your story, because it's Fit Body Bootcamp is, I mean, everybody knows that name. There was 250 locations throughout the United States, and one of the fastest growing, and if not the biggest, one of the biggest franchises in the United States. Was this something that you set your mind to when you were 10 years old and said, I am going to be the CEO of one of the biggest franchises in the U.S.? Or what was your goal growing up, and what did that version of Bryce ultimately yield this?
Yeah, great question. To answer directly, no, I had no idea that I was going to be the CEO of a major international fitness franchise, to say the least, coming from the Midwest. But certainly it's been an evolution. And I think to storytell a little bit, I usually say that I'm from the Midwest. I spent about 11 years in the state of Michigan. But really, my first 10 years were in the state of Georgia. In fact, I used to talk like this when I was a little boy.
No way, you had that accent?
Oh, yeah.
I love it.
In the country, if you will, about a half an hour south. And had on one hand a pretty volatile childhood, and the reason that is my father was an alcoholic, he was a drug addict, and he was addicted to gambling. Not necessarily the trifecta for a good family upbringing, but as the story turns out, the situations, the arguments kind of got tumultuous. And late one, I guess, weekend after my dad went on a bender and I shouldn't say invested, gambled away a lot of money, came home, and my mother, as you would imagine, was not too happy with this behavior, and this has been a pattern. But that situation was different, and the verbal, I guess, confrontation turned violent. And next thing you know, my mom was running upstairs for her life. She wound herself on her bed. My dad was grasping her and basically, choking her out, if you will. And by the grace of God, my little sister kind of, crossed the room and distracted my father, who was like in a drunken stupor, if you will. And my mom slipped his grip, her knees hit the floor, and like a bat out of the hell, shot out of that room. And basically our lives changed. Within the next night, we were basically on a flight to Michigan, and by the grace of God, my grandma was able to take us in. But very humble beginnings, if you will. I guess the next 10 years. Stayed with my grandma, who my brother and I shared a room. My grandma had her own room, and then my mother and my mom and my sister shared not only a room but a bed for the better part of 10 years. And that next 10 years was pretty tumultuous. My mom did the best that she possibly could, but many times we ran out of money before we ran out of month. And it was a really, challenging situation. But I look back and I had some experience. We were talking offline. I ended up living in South America and Brazil and saw what really third world poverty is, which provided a lot of perspective. But at the time, it was certainly challenging. But really what I take from that, and speaking of the Own It, which I just love this concept, love this show, for whatever reason, and probably, factory installed by God above, I took ownership of my situation. I remember when I was in third grade, looking at my hands being like, if it has to be, it's up to me. Like, I'm going to basically take ownership of my life to get us out of this situation. And certainly wasn't overnight, but I think at that moment in time, I set the trajectory of being a successful man, being a man of means, and really not being in a situation like I was, in my youth. So that was kind of the foundation, I guess, for my life. And what I like to see, turn a tragedy to a triumph, and really laid the foundation for future success, while I'm sitting here today.
As chilling, and I'm sure as difficult of a story that must have been for you to go through at such a young age. It's powerful, right? You were able to turn, like you said, this tragedy into a triumph. You know, there's a lot of people in this world who go through the same thing and don't end up where you are. So what is it about you, or how were you able to cultivate a really strong mindset to be able to get through something like that and to ultimately be where you are today?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's probably a lot of sources. Thankfully, we were put in that situation with my grandma and my mom. We moved to Michigan seemingly overnight just because my mom had some family support there. So just like some good support in that perspective. But honestly, I think I'm lucky. I just factory installed. I just decided to look at the situation, and maybe I looked at it from like a choice of either I could, cry and kind of say, poor me, but I kind of ran the tape through and I realized that wasn't going to get me anywhere. In fact, that would probably get me where my father was. Or I could turn the situation and own the situation and say, hey, this is not a good situation. And I'll be very candid with you. I was frustrated. I was scared, a lot of rage. I mean, I was quite angry when I was younger, but I really turned that anger and rage towards the light and trying to make something of myself. And interestingly enough, there's a book by Tim Grover called Relentless, who's the author or coached Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. And he talks about both Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan used to channel 48 minutes of controlled rage at their opponent. And I feel like that's kind of what I did. I basically harnessed that frustration and challenge and anger and just really tried to manifest it towards the light, and that's really kind of how it all worked out.
So use it for good instead of for bad.
Yeah.
When you talk about betting on yourself, it's a concept that I think a lot of people talk about. A lot of entrepreneurs that reason they've gone into entrepreneurship is because they either A, don't want to work for somebody else, or B, they've got this massive internal drive that is the only way in which they can only unleash their creativity is through this. But it all stems from making sure that you're making this one decision, which is to bet on yourself. And how were you able to lean into that and use A, your God-given talents, but B, what did you learn along the way of betting on yourself that continued to improve that confidence and ultimately the results that were yielded?
Yeah, incredible question. And I never actually quantified it like betting on myself. I actually looked at it as like investing in myself. And at a young age, I realized that there's a difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And there's a book actually that came out recently behind that concept. But I quickly kind of, when observing people, realized that some people could actually better themselves and then some people would stay complacent. So I really bought onto the belief that, hey, the belief that I've always felt that I'm better than my circumstance. So if I'm better than my circumstance, I can put myself in a situation to learn, to grow, to acquire a skill. And I always thought to myself, like, someday I'm going to be successful. Now, I didn't have the exact, visual, as I mentioned before, no way in a million years, because I wasn't even a fit guy until I moved to California well past college. So I didn't, fully have that granular vision, but I knew at a very young age that I could develop myself, I could invest in myself, I can read, I can basically, acquire knowledge. And really, in your words, bet on myself to put myself in a situation where I was a better person for it, and ultimately better opportunities would come from it.
I want to dive into that a little bit more because there's so much to be said about cultivating that mindset, a growth mindset. What is a piece of advice you could give our listeners to actually do that in a tangible way? What are some things that maybe you practice on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis to stay in that mindset?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I say this to my team. I'm addicted to know, K-N-O-W. Like, I have this, really, I guess, yearning to learn, to grow. Like, tangible action steps would watch podcasts like these, like read books, read literature, read studies. Put yourself in a mind space where you're, getting positive inputs and you're learning, from people smarter than you. And now leading a major international franchise location or organization, the biggest thing is, I always say, I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, if I'm the smartest person in the room, that's not a good thing. My job is actually to cultivate talent, bring the smart people, bring my man Maine over here who's a magician at filming, bring my different leaders who are good with analytics or marketing or whatever the case may be, and just channel that. And the way you do that is really by surrounding yourself with really strong-minded, like-minded, positive people, and really tapping into different resources. Like I said, like these shows or reading material.
When you talk about this investment in yourself, Have you always been somebody who's been able to do that? Because I mean, growing up where you haven't had the financial means that a lot of other people would have had, you didn't grow up in the most supportive environment that was able to cultivate a lot of this. So obviously this is something that was either A, innate, or B, learned. And how were you able to transform your thought process to, I'm going to continually invest in myself, whether it is based on finances that I have to go and actually pay to be in that room, or I can actually bring value in a different way in order to do that? How did you, for somebody who is like, hey, I don't have $10,000 right now to go and invest in a mentor or a coach, or to get in the room that I need to get into, what are other creative ways that you can do it to ultimately start to accumulate up in what you're doing?
I mean, it sounds so basic, but like work for free. I literally interned at a variety of organizations in my college, days, even when I first moved to California, just to basically like learn a skill. Like basically I started my sales career, no commission sales. I was literally just like dialing on the phone, and I didn't have to make it a big upfront investment, only my time. And through that experience in the first year of my career of basically like phone cold calling and dialing for dollars, like I learned so much just about human interaction and about my pitch and basically what resonates or what lands with some people and what doesn't with others. So I think that that growth mentality and really putting myself out there, knowing that, and I knew this inherently, but I always thought to myself, if I can learn the skill now, the money will come later, and it's worked out for me.
Walk us through a little bit of your journey to now sitting in this seat of CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp.
Yeah, so when I first moved to California, this is after I graduated from Michigan State. I wasn't a fit guy by any stretch of the imaginations, and a fortuitous situation happened a couple years later. And I was excited to be in California, Los Angeles, all the palm trees, the blue skies, the beaches, all that.
The Hollywood dream.
The Hollywood dream, right?
Especially coming from a cold place like Michigan.
Totally, right? And my first experience actually was leaving Michigan, and I think we were talking offline, with a foot of snow, and then arriving to Southern California with 75-degree weather.
We've both been in that position too.
Very true.
Buffalo and Edmonton. I'm preaching to the choir over here. But as much as I was excited to be in California, the first year and a half, 2 years, I had more dark days than good. I mean, I was 3,000 miles from home, little professional skills. I kind of walked you through the journey of cold calling and all that. But really, if I break it down, I didn't have the energy, the vibrance. I didn't have fitness in my life. And that really laid the foundation when a year and a half passed by. A fortuitous situation, a good buddy of mine that I went to college with wasn't on the cover of Men's Health, but he could have been. He had the six-pack abs, the muscles, the confidence, the energy. All the girls looked up or loved him, and I looked up to that. So I finally mustered up enough courage to ask him, hey, Adam, can you show me a little bit about this fitness thing? So what he did, he introduced me to circuit training and lifting weights and clean, eating. But he, most importantly, introduced me to coaching and accountability. And I think when I saw the Fit Body Bootcamp model a couple years later, even though Fit Body wasn't even in existence at the time, because this is 15 years ago in early 2007, what I realized when I saw the model of circuit training and clean nutrition, but coaching and accountability, like the light went on, and I thought, okay, this worked for me, it certainly can work for other people. And going through that fitness transformation really laid that foundation. Then, Justin, to answer your question, after I got fit, I never thought in a million years that I could actually make fitness a full-time profession, although I did know that I became one of the least performing sales rep in my company, all the way to the highest performing sales rep in my company because of fitness. So I thought, okay, I'll get certified as a personal trainer and train some clients on the nights and weekends. And that was actually the plan. And I believe I updated my Facebook profile, the personal trainer on Facebook, and I started receiving ads from this guy named Bedros Keuilian, who just so happens to be
Who's that?
Right? The founder of Fit Body. And that was like my launching pad to basically open my eyes to, actually, maybe I can open my own Fit Body location. And one thing led to another, and we were talking about offline about this in 2012, decided to muster up all my courage and confidence and passion and also all my life savings. And after a 2-year stint in Brazil, where I met my wife, we decided to open our first location, and that really laid the foundation for a handful of other locations from 2012 to 18, and had a lot of success. Also had some challenges and trials and tribulations like any entrepreneur does, but in that period of time learned a ton about coaching, about health and wellness, but most importantly about leadership and really gaining business acumen. And that really set the stage for 2018 when our brand was really hockey sticking. And Bedros very fortuitously reached out to me and offered me his vice president role, which he still gives me a hard time to this day because I didn't decline it, to let the record be known.
Even though he's not here.
I didn't accept it at first, and I think being a hard-charging entrepreneur, I had my vision. I had 5 locations. I was going to scale to 10. But after a few conversations, I took a step back and was like, all right, what's my real purpose? I love helping people. I love, I'm passionate about that. And I thought to myself, you know what, I can actually help more people on a franchisor level by basically teaching other owners and coaches to replicate the process than I can opening locations. And that was really when the spark kind of hit that, hey, I actually want to join forces. So in 2018, I joined as his VP, and fast forward a few years, even battling through COVID and all the challenges that it's created. In 2021, last year, is when B basically offered me the position for his CEO as his empire is growing and wanted to put someone in the trenches that knows the day-to-day operations, has good leadership skills, and that's kind of how it all came to be.
Well, kudos to you. That is amazing and quite the career path there.
Thank you.
I'm curious, what was it about you that Bedros saw in you to pick out of 400 other franchisees to be able to say, hey, come join our team and ultimately be our CEO?
Shoot, Elise. Humbling myself when he first made the call, I got to be honest with you, I was like, me? Like, me? But I took a step back and, ultimately, looking at my career and all that. Number one, I invest in relationships and I invest in coaching as well. And I was the type of guy who, when I first, joined the brand, I was green, literally. I had no idea how to run a business. I didn't know the marketing. I had the sales experience. I felt confident that I can convert people, but I just didn't know how the whole operation ran. So I tapped into the coaching and I joined the mastermind group. I tapped into the franchise, and every 90 days I would meet, in a mastermind format with Bedros, and B, as we call for short, and B would give me the marching orders, and I would just take action on the marching orders. I'd come back 90 days later, my business had grown. So I think, being coachable, also, again, developing in relationships. And, I think I'd like to think through fitness and through my positive mindset, I'd like to think I give off good energy. That's what really Bedros says. And I think a combination of a few of those things, it worked out in that way.
Well, it's very clear you're somebody who lives in what we call an ownership mindset, right? In our conversation, I'm sensing a lot of humility from you.
Thank you.
I'm sensing really strong leadership skills, but then also, you said it a couple times now, living in much more of a growth mindset as opposed to a scarcity mindset.
Yeah. Easier said than done. I feel like human nature, we're wired for scarcity.
Absolutely.
So it is like it's a proactive, learning growth experience. But, shoot, I appreciate the nice accolades. I'm a work in progress as well, but
we all are.
Yeah. It's been a great journey so far, and I'm excited to continue.
I love it. I want to go back to something you said, and you were talking about, I've got it highlighted here, you're talking about energy, and you talked about how your energy is something that Bedros picked up on. You talked about how showing up for not only your people in your locations when you physically had them, but now for the entire team. You're running something of a corporate level now. And as founders and CEOs, you're always a salesperson. Always a salesperson. You have to sell 2 things now. You have to sell your actual product, but you also have to sell the mission and the dream to everybody else. And so I'm not surprised that you came from sales and were a rock star at sales, but the only way you're a rock star at sales is through the energy and passion that you bring. And so how do you cultivate that type of energy?
Well, shoot, my friend, we just shot an awesome podcast that you just laid down incredible biohacks on energy. So I'm literally taking some notes here, and I'm going to be applying some things to my life. But it comes down to health and wellness, and we just talked about this offline about having a consistent going to bed time. I'm literally boring actually. I'm clockwork.
Yeah.
I go to bed at 8 o'clock, I wake up at 4 o'clock.
If someone was hunting you, it would be really easy.
The easiest prey ever. The easiest prey ever. But I'm to your point, this is one of the big takeaways for you, sleep. I'm religious about my sleep. That actually fuels my fire. I get up, I always work out within 60 minutes of basically waking up, and that gives me energy. So I just feel like I have a regimented schedule. I start my day with a win. For me, working out, getting a good sweat just clears my mind. It kind of gives me the edge, if you will. I do cryotherapy as well to kind of shock the body, although I'm going to have to do some of the testing to make sure that I'm on the right path there.
We'll give you some tips as to how to optimize that for you.
I would love that. But I think those are some fundamental habits that just like fire me up. And I just think also too, like living a healthy and fit lifestyle, I'll be very candid with you. I wasn't the confident guy, the energetic guy, the guy that had, vibrancy before my fitness journey. And it's why I'm so passionate. I'm the #1 salesman of Fit Body Bootcamp, and not anything great about me, but my role is that I have to be the biggest believer in the brand, the biggest salesman in the brand. And it starts with my own belief in fitness, my belief and passion in it.
I love that.
Yeah, and that's amazing. One of the things that we talk about so often on this podcast is 2 key things. One, a strong foundation, right? For us, we use the 8 controllables to be able to create everybody's own personalized version of that strong foundation. And 2, aligning ourselves with something greater, a greater purpose or a greater passion. And you mentioned, when you had that moment where Bedros reached out to you to come on and take the VP role, you're at a crossroads, right? You had mentioned it was, I could continue on, build my 5-10 Fit Body boot camps, or I can really step back and serve a greater purpose. So I'm curious how you felt in that moment.
When B made that offer to me,
Yeah.
I was humbled, I was confused, I was excited, I was scared. It took me a little while to process, and I'm the type of guy, like I take calculated risks. So I'm not just something to jump into something, but I'm also on the other side, I'm not the data guy. I don't fully analyze everything to that perspective. Sometimes I'll shoot from the hip and go from like an intuition. So it's this blend of like taking a calculated risk, but just like trusting my gut. So I think, in that process, those are my feelings that I went through. And then of course I asked the right questions. It was a big shift as well. But after about, a few conversations and a few weeks in, I was like, all right, let's go.
I love
That's
it.
amazing. Yeah, what I call, a lot of clients I work with say, how do I make the most well-rounded, best decisions for myself? And I call it the mindfulness trifecta. It's a balance of check in with your logic, your head, check in with your emotions, your heart, and then ultimately let your intuition lead, which sounds like exactly what you did.
I love that. That's my frame. That's my framework without knowing the framework.
Yeah, it is. That's exactly what it is.
Bryce, I'm really curious because you talked about it, but I'm sure culture has been something that drives your business. And you in yourself are a leader. You can just tell, you ooze it. And it's somebody that people are going to want to follow. Knowing that you have 250 locations globally, you're an international brand, how do you create and manifest culture in something that is hard to bring everybody into a physical location? I'm sure when you did it at your own Fit Body boot camps, they had their own culture, they had their own vibrance, and it's great when you have full control of that. But when there's so many different entities and so many different places, how do you continue to manufacture that culture that everybody buys into, everybody loves, so you can create that energy that then is Fit Body Bootcamp?
Incredible question. It's not about me at all, but it starts with me. I set the tone for the organization. I set the tone for how I look, how I feel, how I show up. And the energy and the culture radiates through me that way. Like to my leadership team, I need to be showing up vibrant, like ready to go, like, hey, I'm here to serve, I'm here to support, with a full level of energy and a full level of confidence towards the mission ahead. That bleeds to my leadership team, that bleeds to my franchise business coaches, which I call our coaching and profitability team, which then are the connectivity points to our location owners. And that energy flows through our owners to their coaches, to their clients. So, I guess in a philosophical way, that's how I view my role in the business. Like, I'm the chief evangelist officer. And that really is a self-defining way I look at the culture of the organization. I also am a strong believer that culture is developed by relationships. We are in the relationship business first and foremost, far more than the nutrition, coaching, etc. That's all very important part of the equation, but we're in the relationship. So when you cultivate deep relationships and you have a love for people, I feel like I'm very lucky. I naturally just love people. Like I probably factory installed. I learned a lot also from my mother as well, who's like the most caring person ever. So I love people. I love to help people, and I think that also sets the tone for the culture. And then also too, logistically, I mean, we have trainings and meetups, and we have a huge world conference every year. We actually just had one in Scottsdale, Arizona last week. Jesse Itzler was our big keynote, if you're familiar with him.
Yep.
He talked about soul. He talked, and I usually talk about it in those words, culture, but he talked about his theme, his mantra for the last few years. Every January he sets his new intention for the year. And the last 4 years, it's been soul. And I told my team, I was like, that is what our unique selling proposition is. Fit Body, we have soul, because the universe rewards soul.
Yeah,
I
how
love that.
powerful.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about it, you can just see you light up.
Yeah,
right?
fire me up.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you a question that our listeners love in every single podcast. If you could tell us in a word or a phrase, what is your definition of ownership?
Full accountability, full responsibility, never point any fingers.
Love that. That's really strong.
So as it comes down to it, Bryce, it's amazing just to see the way in which you lead. Like you embody everything that you preach. You can tell, and I think that comes with experience. It comes with living a life that has taken you in a multitude of different directions, and you've had to learn from those things. Things have been difficult, and then life has ultimately, as you said, rewarded you for staying the course. And so I honor you for who you are. I honor you for your conviction to a mission and a purpose, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Pleasure is mine. You guys are fantastic, and man, I'm so excited to see you guys flourish as well as we do it together.
I love it.
Thank you. Where can our listeners find you? Website, Instagram handle?
Yeah, so our big URL across the board I would direct you to fitbodybootcamp.com, fitbodybootcamp.com, and then my social media handles is real Bryce Henson, not to be confused with fake Bryce Henson.
Because there are a lot of those out there. And honestly, there's a lot of fake accounts for everybody.
Totally.
I am not selling crypto. Bryce is not selling crypto. So just don't even acknowledge it. Real Bryce Henson.
That's it. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all that. So
I love it. And be sure to follow him, guys. Like, it's incredible when you find somebody who actually authentically leads and leans into who they are, leans into that true mission, and understands that when you invest in yourself, others are going to invest into you. And it all starts with that. Invest in relationships, invest in coaching, be coachable, drive with that positive energy, because that's what creates change and that's what cultivates culture. As CEOs, executives, founders, moms and dads, whatever you're leading with, you are a salesperson, whether you like it or not. You're selling your mission, you're selling your vision, you're selling whatever decision you're trying to get somebody else to make. And so as you go in that way, you set the tone, because whether it's positive or whether it's negative, it flows downhill, and we are all in the relationships business. So remember, guys, success is different. Own your different. We'll see you next week.